Not all NFL owners are created equal. Some are masterminds who build dynasties. Others, well, they couldn't manage a little league team without causing a scandal. Today we're ranking all 32 NFL owners, from the power players building Super Bowl contenders to the billionaires actively ruining Sundays for millions of fans. We'll break down their biggest strengths, dumbest mistakes, and why some of them should be banned from making football decisions forever. Buckle up, because some of these owners are more dangerous than a Zach Wilson red zone possession. Alright, coming in dead last is an owner I think most people have come to hate, rightfully so. David Tepper bought the Panthers in 2018, and it's been chaos ever since. Despite being the richest owner in the NFL, he's been the worst at showing patience or football instincts. He's burned through 3 head coaches, pushed for the Bryce Young pick over CJ Stroud, and has been accused of micromanaging to the point of dysfunction. His biggest mistake, firing Frank Reich less than halfway through the season and constantly hitting reset. His strength, he's aggressive and not afraid to spend, but that means nothing if every decision sets the franchise back 5 years. Tepper's trying to win fast, but all he's done is light his own roster on fire. Woody Johnson has owned the Jets since 2000, and the results have been an extended case study in dysfunction. In over 2 decades, the Jets have become a punchline, cycling through coaches, GMs, and quarterbacks like they're on a roulette wheel. His biggest mistake? Hiring Adam Gase and meddling in football decisions despite having no clue how to build a winning culture. His only real strength is that he's willing to spend and chase talent. But with Woody, it's all flash, no substance. And until he steps back or sells, the Jets will keep finding new ways to lose. You know it's bad when your most successful quarterback of your tenure has been Mark Sanchez. Mark Davis inherited the Raiders in 2011, and it's been dysfunction ever since. From giving John Gruden a 10-year, $100 million contract to the disastrous Josh McDaniels era, Davis has made a habit of hiring the wrong people and sticking with them too long. He let nostalgia dictate strategy and failing to build any real long-term vision. Only benefit is that he moved the team to Las Vegas, which has been a business success, but the product on the field is still stuck in the past. He's loyal and passionate, but way out of his depth. Plus, that haircut alone had him knock down a few pegs on this list. Jimmy Haslam bought the Browns in 2012 and has turned an already cursed franchise into an even bigger mess. He's gone through coaches and GMs like he's taste testing dysfunction. His biggest mistake is now iconic, handing Deshaun Watson a fully guaranteed $230 million contract while the quarterback was still under investigation for serious misconduct. The move alienated fans, damaged the locker room, and reset the QB market in the worst way. His strength? He spends money and wants to win, but with no patience and poor judgment, the Browns under Haslam have been permanently stuck in reverse. The Browns are always going to find a way to be the Browns, which sucks for the city of Cleveland. Amy Adams Strunk took control of the Titans in 2015 and has kept the team competitive, but often at the cost of long-term vision. Her most obvious flaw, firing GM John Robinson mid-season in 2022, just after he extended head coach Mike Vrabel, and then watching AJ Brown torch them on national TV days later. She's heavily involved, but not always in the best way. Her strength is loyalty and culture. The Titans have rarely been outright bad, but the roster's stale, the offense is outdated, and it feels like Tennessee is stuck in NFL purgatory with no clear direction. Plus, they wasted a prime Derrick Henry, which will never be forgiven. Shahid Khan bought the Jaguars in 2011 and has mostly delivered chaos with occasional sparks of hope. The most obvious mistake was giving Urban Meyer the keys to the franchise in 2021, a hire so toxic it set the team back years in a matter of months. Khan has also shown a pattern of hiring the wrong people and keeping them too long, especially in the front office. His strength? He's committed to Jacksonville and has made real investments in facilities and branding. But until he consistently hires football minds who know what they're doing, the Jags will stay stuck between rebuilds and reboots. Plus, his son is just kinda annoying, but I won't hold that against him on this list. John Mara, part of the Mara family dynasty that's owned the Giants since 1925, has struggled mightily to adapt to the modern NFL. His biggest mistake? Holding on to Daniel Jones far too long, whiffing on multiple head coaches and GMs, and refusing to modernize modernize until very recently. For nearly a decade, the Giants were one of the most boring and backwards franchises in the league. His strength is tradition and loyalty, but those have often been liabilities. With Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen now in charge, things look better, but that's only after years of self-inflicted misery. Their quarterback situation is almost permanently inconsistent, but hey, he managed to win 2 Super Bowls, so there's that, I guess. The McCaskey family has owned the Bears since the literal founding of the NFL, but that legacy hasn't translated to on-field success in decades. Virginia McCaskey, now over 100 years old, still technically owns the team, but her son George runs the day-to-day, and that's where the problems lie. The Bears have constantly failed to hire the right GMs or head coaches and haven't had a franchise quarterback ever. They mistake tradition for progress, but they shine in their loyalty and stability, but in today's league, that's not enough to win. Chicago fans deserve a forward-thinking reset, and they've waited long enough. Plus, they've been through enough first-round quarterbacks that the rest of the league could have had a franchise QB years ago. Dean Spanos has owned the Chargers since taking over from his father in 1994, and he's made them the NFL's most anonymous franchise. The biggest issue with his ownership? Moving the team to LA without a real plan, alienating the fan base and creating an identity crisis that still hasn't been resolved. Despite having elite talent like Justin Herbert, his teams underachieve constantly. The stadium is filled with more away fans than home ones, and the vibes are perpetually weird. There is a bright spot though. He's not cheap and he doesn't meddle too much, but that's not enough. The Chargers feel like a great team being run by a guy trying to stay out of the way while everything burns. I don't think the city of San Diego will ever forgive him for what he did. Jim Irsay has owned the Colts since 1997, and while he oversaw the Peyton Manning era and a Super Bowl win, the last decade has been chaotic. His biggest mistake? Constantly meddling, most notably hiring Jeff Saturday off a TV set to coach an NFL team. The Colts have cycled through quarterbacks like crazy since Andrew Luck retired, and Irsay has often made emotional, impulsive moves that derail any long-term strategy. His strength is passion. He loves his team, his players, and wants to win, but passion without discipline is just noise. And lately, that's what the Colts have become. Not to mention, the most obvious blunder was just not building an offensive line around one of the best quarterback talents the league had ever seen. Michael Bidwill took over full control of the Cardinals in 2007, and while he helped modernize the franchise with a new stadium and occasional playoff runs, the last few years have been a mess. Hiring and extending Cliff Kingsbury and GM Steve Keem, then watching the entire thing implode around Kyler Murray's contract was definitely not good. He's also been accused of enabling a toxic front office environment and micromanaging decisions with no clear football vision. But he does spend, and the Cardinals don't usually operate on a tight budget. But spending money and building a winner are two very different things, and Bidwill hasn't figured out the second part. You'd think with the amount of money he's willing to blow, they would at least have a championship by now. Stephen Ross bought the Dolphins in 2009 and has bounced between hopeful rebuilds and PR disasters ever since. His biggest issue? The tampering scandals, trying to recruit Tom Brady while he was still under contract and offering to pay Brian Flores to tank games, which sparked a massive lawsuit and league investigation. Despite all that, Ross has started to put it together recently. He is definitely aggressive. He'll spend, take risks, and go after stars like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey. Now that he's backed off a bit and let football minds work, the Dolphins are finally trending up, but it's been a bumpy ride. I feel like Dolphins fans wish they had as much brain damage as Tua will before he retires at this point. Mike Brown has owned the Bengals since 1991, and for most of that time, he was considered one of the worst owners in football. He ran the team on a shoestring budget, avoided free agency, and was painfully loyal to mediocre coaching staffs. But in the last few years, things have changed. His biggest mistake is the decades-long insistence on doing things his way with minimal investment in scouting and staff. His biggest strength now is stepping back. His daughter Katie Blackburn has taken on a bigger role, and Joe Burrow's emergence has dragged the Bengals into relevance. It's still not a perfect operation, but they've turned a major corner. However, the fact they don't have an indoor practice facility in Cincinnati feels absolutely insane considering he is a billionaire. Greg Penner and the Walton Penner ownership group bought the Broncos in 2022, instantly becoming one of the richest ownership groups in the NFL. And while it's still early, their first year was rough. Their biggest blunder by far was giving Sean Payton massive control and trying to clean up the Russell Wilson disaster after handing him a $245 million extension. But to their credit, they moved on quickly and swallowed the financial pain to reset the roster. Their strength is their deep pockets and willingness to act decisively. If they can stabilize the coaching and quarterback positions, this ownership group could rise fast. But so far, it's been more firepower than execution. At least he's willing to spend money though. That is a lot more than a lot of owners on this list can say. Cal McNair inherited the Texans from his father in 2018, and it's been a roller coaster. The Deshaun Watson scandal, the Jack Easterby disaster, and a revolving door of head coaches made Houston look like a joke for several years. I think his biggest issue was letting a chaplain turned front office exec run the franchise like a cult, and standing by while the team spiraled into irrelevance. But lately, things have turned around. Hiring DeMeco Ryans and drafting CJ Stroud might go down as the two best moves in franchise history. His strength now is that he's backed off. The Texans finally look like a team with a plan, and for once, McNair isn't getting in the way. They have one of the most promising futures of any franchise if he can just keep his hands off the steering wheel. Jody Allen took over the Seahawks in 2018 following the death of her brother, Paul Allen. She's not a front-facing owner, but her hands-off style has mostly worked thanks to the structure Paul left behind. Her biggest mistake? Sticking with the Pete Carroll John Schneider pairing a bit too long during a stretch of roster stagnation, but she deserves credit for backing the bold move to trade Russell Wilson, a gamble that reset the franchise in the best way. Her strength is trust. She lets football people run the show and doesn't interfere. Seattle isn't quite back to contender status yet, but they're ahead of schedule under her steady, quiet leadership. I think this franchise will always have a super passionate fan base, and at least she is in a culture that wants to win badly. Josh Harris bought the Commanders in 2023, and just by not being Dan Snyder, he automatically became a hero. In less than a year, he's rebranded the culture, cleaned house in the front office, and started modernizing a franchise that's been stuck in the Stone Age for 2 decades. It's still early, but his biggest issue so far may be indecision. He took his time on big hires like GM and coach, which created some confusion, but his best trait is obvious. He brings professionalism, long-term vision, and credibility to a team that desperately needed it. If he keeps this trajectory, he could climb this list fast. Not to mention that Jaden Daniels' pick is looking more and more like a genius move that everyone is going to be jealous of for years to come. Sheila Ford Hamp took over majority control of the Lions in 2020, and for the first time in forever, it feels like the team has real direction. Her biggest mistake? She kept GM Bob Quinn and head coach Matt Patricia too long, allowing them to set the franchise back with terrible draft picks and locker room culture issues. But once she cleaned house and hired Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, everything changed. Her strength is patience. She backed the new regime through a rough first season, and now the Lions are one of the NFL's best run teams. Detroit might finally have a future, and Hamp deserves credit for letting it grow. I mean, the fact that they went from perpetual dumpster to consistent contenders over the course of 5 years is huge. The city of Detroit loves this ownership change. Gayle Benson took over the Saints in 2018, and while she doesn't make a lot of headlines, she's been a steady hand for a team transitioning out of the Drew Brees, Sean Payton era. She should have pulled the trigger on a hard rebuild when it was clearly needed. The team's been stuck in cap hell and mediocrity since 2021, clinging to a window that's clearly closed. But she is very loyal to her staff. Mickey Loomis and the front office have been empowered, and the organization still has a strong identity. If she gives the green light for a reset, the Saints could turn the corner quickly. She did put them into a crazy cap situation that is going to be hard for them to get out of, but overall, she is at least willing to spend to try to win now, instead of sitting around waiting. The Glazer family has owned the Bucs since 1995, and while they've had stretches of irrelevance, they've also delivered 2 Super Bowl titles in that span. The post-Gruden years were a disaster, frequent coaching changes, bad free agent moves, and a decade with no clear vision, but they have an ability to pivot when it matters. They pushed all their chips in to land Tom Brady, and it paid off instantly with a 2020 title. They're also well-respected owners in the Premier League with Manchester United. When they commit big, and that gives Tampa a fighting chance. I also think the Baker Mayfield move is going to come around as one of the best choices they've made. However, whoever followed Tom Brady was going to have big shoes to fill. Jerry Jones bought the Cowboys in 1989, and you could argue he's the most famous owner in sports. He built the Cowboys into a global brand worth billions and turned AT&T Stadium into the NFL's crown jewel. His biggest mistake? Acting as GM for decades and letting ego override smart football decisions, resulting in a 28-year Super Bowl drought despite having elite rosters. But his strength? He cares. He spends big, markets brilliantly, and keeps Dallas relevant whether they're winning or not. Say what you will, but Jerry made the Cowboys the NFL's headline team, even if he can't get them over the hump anymore. I do think though, if the city of Dallas has one more year of swearing it's their year, they might actually go insane. Keeping Tony Romo as long as he did was also a bit of a blunder. Jed York took over in the early 2000s and had a rough start, firing coaches like Jim Harbaugh and stumbling through the Chip Kelly-Tom Sula era. But to his credit, he learned from it. His biggest mistake? Letting personal tensions with Harbaugh destroy a Super Bowl caliber team. But now, he's built one of the NFL's most balanced front offices with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, and the results speak for themselves. The 49ers are a perennial contender. His strength is that he finally backed off, hired smart people, and let them cook. That kind of growth is rare, and it's paying off. The only downside for him is that this Super Bowl window is starting to close for them, and I don't know how quickly they'll be able to rebuild for a third time. Arthur Blank bought the Falcons in 2002 and instantly brought credibility, class, and stability to the franchise. He lets loyalty cloud his judgment. He held on to Dan Quinn and GM Thomas Dimitroff far too long after the infamous 28-3 Super Bowl collapse. The team hasn't really recovered its identity since, but Blank is a model owner in terms of culture, investment, and community presence. He stays out of football decisions but is aggressive when needed. His leadership helped elevate the Falcons from irrelevance to multiple deep playoff runs, and if he nails the next coach QB combo, they'll be back, which seems to be on the right track with Michael Penix, but that Kirk Cousins contract was definitely a choice to say the least. Zygi Wilf and his family bought the Vikings in 2005 and have quietly turned them into one of the most stable, well-run teams in the league. His biggest mistake? Committing too hard to the Kirk Cousins era without ever building a complete roster around him. But Wilf's strengths are big. He funded a gorgeous new stadium, built a modern front office, and is deeply respected by players and staff. The Vikings are competitive almost every year and operate like a grown-up organization. They haven't gotten over the hump yet, but with Wilf in charge, they're always in the mix, and that's more than most fans can say. I do think if he can manage to actually bring a championship to Minnesota, he easily jumps to the top of this list. His players seem to love playing for him. Stan Kroenke is controversial. He moved the Rams out of St. Louis, crushed a fan base, and caught tons of heat for it. But from a pure ownership standpoint, he's elite. He built SoFi Stadium, landed Sean McVay, aggressively pursued a Super Bowl, and won it in 2021. His biggest issue was honestly something he had to do, the St. Louis departure and some PR disasters along the way, but on the field, he's delivered. Kroenke is willing to spend, make bold trades, and push boundaries. He's not afraid of all-in moves. If winning is the goal, Kroenke is doing the job, even if he burned a few bridges to get there. I also think in a league of owners who are willing to just sit back and do nothing, you have to give credit to people willing to at least make a push to win now. Terry Pegula bought the Bills in 2014 and instantly became a hero in Buffalo for keeping the team in town and committing to turning them into a contender. His biggest mistake? Early front office instability and sticking with Rex Ryan longer than he should have. But once he hired Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, the Bills took off. His strength is unwavering support. Pegula spends money, backs his staff, and helped revitalize the franchise both culturally and competitively. He gave Buffalo an identity again. The Super Bowl hasn't come yet, but under Pegula, it feels possible. And that's a huge win in itself. Plus, I think the Bills Mafia has to be one of the hardest fan bases to keep happy, so he is under a ton of pressure but doing well. The Packers are the NFL's only publicly owned team with no traditional owner, and honestly, it's beautiful. With Mark Murphy running football ops and Brian Gutekunst handling the roster, the Packers operate with a rare mix of stability, tradition, and smart decision-making. Their biggest weakness? Sometimes moving too cautiously or conservatively, especially in free agency, but their strength is obvious. No meddling, no egos, no billionaire chaos, just football. The team belongs to the fans, and they've consistently contended for decades. decades. If the rest of the league ran like Green Bay, a lot of problems would disappear. They've managed to have a string of successful franchise quarterbacks most teams would literally kill for, so that's also a huge bonus. Steve Bisciotti bought the Ravens in 2004, and since then, the team has been one of the NFL's best run organizations. His biggest mistake, maybe sticking with Joe Flacco a season too long, but even then, he pivoted perfectly to Lamar Jackson. Bisciotti's strength is his consistency. He keeps John Harbaugh and GM Eric DeCosta in place, trusts them, and it shows. The Ravens are always competitive, never chaotic, and run with a level of professionalism that other franchises envy. Bisciotti isn't flashy. He's just good, and the Ravens record proves it. I do think they could do a bit more aggressive moves in free agency, but they are consistently on the edge of being in a Super Bowl despite not getting there yet with Jackson. Jeffrey Lurie bought the Eagles in 1994 and has been one of the NFL's smartest, most progressive owners ever since. His biggest mistake? Letting the Chip Kelly experiment go too far, but he corrected course immediately. His strength? He's a builder. He hired Andy Reid, then Doug Peterson, then Nick Sirianni, three very different coaches, all of whom won or made a Super Bowl. Lurie embraces analytics, culture, and innovation. He lets his GMs work, adapts to new trends, and consistently puts Philly in a position to win. The Eagles have been relevant for 2 decades because Lurie is always one step ahead. Plus, he brought the first 2 Lombardis to Philadelphia, so you have to respect that he actually managed to bring chips home. The Rooney family has been running the Steelers forever, and under Art Rooney II, the tradition of excellence has continued. His biggest mistake? Being too loyal at times, especially during the slow decline of the Big Ben era, but his strength? Everything else. The Steelers are the most stable franchise in the NFL. 3 head coaches since 1969, a clear identity, and a culture that players respect. Rooney isn't chasing headlines, he's building legacy, and even when the Steelers aren't great, they're never bad. That's ownership done right. I do think if the Mike Tomlin experiment continues to give crappy wildcard seasons, eventually it will be time to make a change. But the Steelers are least being in the conversation every year is a huge accolade. Robert Kraft bought the Patriots in 1994 and helped engineer the greatest dynasty in NFL history. His biggest mistake? Holding on to the Bill Belichick regime a bit too long after Tom Brady left. But come on, 6 Super Bowl wins, 9 appearances, and 2 decades of sustained dominance. His strength is obvious. He empowers the right people, holds them accountable, and knows when to step back. Kraft also rebuilt the team's brand from joke to gold standard. The post-Brady era has been rough, but nobody can touch his track record over the last 25 years. He does love massages almost as much as Deshaun Watson though, which might not be the best trait in an owner. Clark Hunt took over the Chiefs in 2006 after the death of his father, Lamar Hunt, and has become the gold standard for modern NFL ownership. His biggest mistake? Maybe waiting too long to fire some early coaches, but that's ancient history now. His strength? He hired Andy Reid, drafted Patrick Mahomes, and hasn't looked back. Hunt lets his football people lead, stays out of the headlines, and operates with quiet excellence. The Chiefs are now the NFL's model franchise, and that doesn't happen without elite ownership at the top. He is definitely one of the cheapest owners though, and the fact he is currently holding his city hostage for a new stadium is not cool. That is our current list of owners in the NFL. I know some of my selections won't be very popular, so let me know what you think I got wrong. Also, check out our last video about the 10 hardest hitting linebackers in NFL history.